The Edible Bean School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by Hensel Co-op.
Joining us for this episode of the Edible Bean School here on Real Agriculture, we're pleased once again to welcome Dennis Lange, pulse specialist with Manitoba Agriculture and a longtime veteran of the edible bean sector here in Manitoba. And Dennis, we're at the Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada Morden Research Farm. Can you tell us about the plots, the trials that we're standing in here, what you're looking at?
Well, the trials that we're looking at here right now are actually the regional dry bean trials. They're sponsored by Manitoba pulse and soybean growers, and various companies that provide varieties for these trials are located in both Canada and the U.S. The purpose of these trials is to give growers a first look at some new lines, and also to have a look at how they compare to some of our existing lines that we're currently growing.
So as growers, right now, harvest is underway in this area. It's started, I should say. It's paused right now due to excess moisture, which these plots are showing some symptoms of. But as growers are looking at that variety selection decision for next year, in addition to what class of bean to grow, what variety of bean to grow, this is the type of data that is used to inform those decisions?
Oh, most definitely. What we typically do in these trials is we have a check comparison variety. That's a variety that's popular and known to growers that they're familiar with. And that variety also has to have very strong yield and good quality aspects as well. So when we are introducing or testing new lines in this trial, we want to make sure those lines are equally good as the check variety in not only yield but in quality, and if you're looking at something with better pod height, a little bit better pod height, better disease resistance. Those are all the things that we look at in these trials.
And like you said, companies also, some of these varieties wouldn't be on the market yet. Companies would be testing them here to see whether they have a geographical fit and that type of thing.
Most exactly, because a lot of times when you get new lines coming in from the U.S., sometimes companies may not be familiar with how they're going to perform in Manitoba. This gives companies a first look if it's a new line, and from there what happens if the variety does really well and the company is happy with that, they will then enter it into the co-op testing system. With the co-op testing system, that is run by Ag Canada, and the data that comes off of those plots are then submitted for acceptance into registration with Prairie Grain Development Committee. And I sit on that committee as well and review the data every year. And it's a good way to really, this trial is a good way to really get a first look. But also, too, if a company is looking at bringing new varieties into Manitoba, they need to make sure they have it in the co-op trial if they want to get it registered. But if they really want to have a first look at it, this is a perfect trial for that, because we have 4 different locations of wide road beans: Winkler, Morden, of course, Portage, and Carmen, and testing under different environments just to see how they perform every year. And we compile that data in Seed Manitoba and the Manitoba Pulse and Soybean Growers Variety Guide in the fall, and that information will be coming out later this November.
Mm-hmm. So edible beans, like other specialty crops, often have an issue where one variety tends to dominate a market class. Can you speak to the importance of research like this and data collection like this in terms of addressing that issue and some of the risk there?
Well, exactly. With dry beans, we always tend to find there's one bean variety that seems to dominate a class, and it tends to do that for a number of years for various reasons, whether it's just yield or pod height, maturity. All those things kind of play into it. And what ends up happening in these trials is we're looking at some new lines to see if there's any new quality parameters. An example of this, going back a number of years, we used to grow a variety called Hardblack in Manitoba. When we relied only on that one variety, didn't have really a lot of other options. With Hardblack, we ran into some issues a number of years ago with hard seeds and purpling, and that changed the industry a little bit. And then what we find now is that, you know, we may have one major variety per class, but we also have 2 or 3 others as kind of our backup, if you want to call it that, so that we can, if there's a year where, you know, let's say quality is affected on one variety, we have something else we can work with. But the importance of these trials is just to make sure we have enough data, and so then when we do want to bring in different varieties, we have those options.
Yeah, that diversity then can be valuable, resilience.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Are you noticing any trends in terms of characteristics that breeders and companies are favoring right now? I know, like you said, you're looking at yield, disease packages. Of course, we're always working on improving disease packages. Harvestability seems to have been a characteristic that has certainly gained prominence among growers in terms of being able to take beans off with a flex head instead of having to cut them?
Yes, I think over the years, when I first started in the industry, we were all growing row crop beans. It was all row crop, undercut, windrow. That was the way we do it. Then over the years, we started to see more upright beans, more direct harvesting happening, and we started to see even some of the pintos going down that road. The industry has evolved to include slow darkening pintos. That's helped the industry grow as well and have better shelf life. But the other factor I think that really plays into it is the pot height, but also to maturity, because we are seeing expansion in Manitoba in different areas. In the southwest corner, up in the Swan River area, we've seen some dry beans, some black beans grown in the last few years with some good success. So that's the importance of some of these trials, just so that we are finding varieties that have suitable maturity for whatever area you want to grow in, but also to have the yield, because you can have something super early that doesn't yield and it doesn't take off. We've had that happen over the years as well. So that's why these trials are so important, to be able to collect that data and have reference, to be able to reference back and help growers make decisions.
Finally then, Dennis, I think there's been a lot of excitement about growing edible beans, dry beans this last year here in Manitoba, Ontario, and other growing areas, partly because of the market strength that we've seen for the crop. But also there's been some yield potential. We mentioned the excess moisture that's come through here lately holding up harvest. Can you fill us in on what the final numbers are in terms of acres that were grown in Manitoba this year? And I know yield is still yet to be determined, but kind of paint a picture of what we've seen for this year's crop.
Well, starting in the spring, I think there's a lot of excitement about dry beans in Manitoba. We were, potentially going to see 200,000 acres in Manitoba. And, as spring kind of rolled along and growers started making some other decisions based on the weather, a few delays here and there, we ended up with about 172,000 acres of dry beans in Manitoba, which is still a pretty strong number. It's up from the previous year. The big acre increase was in pintos, which were well over 100,000 there, and that's the first time we've ever hit that number. And on black beans, we ended up with about 30,000 acres. So definitely lots of potential there for growers and lots of excitement there. We've had a kind of a mixed bag here in Manitoba this year. We've had some dry conditions. We've had very windy conditions in spring where growers have had to do some reseeding. We've had some wet weather here and there, especially lately here. The area that we're standing in, we're upwards of 4 to 5 inches of rain. So the quality on some of those beans that were undercut and laying in the ground, there's going to be some questions about that yet. We're not sure how it's going to end up, but there's definitely going to be some quality loss. But what we'll have to do is we'll have to wait and see until the ground dries up and we can start getting in there. The beans that are still standing right now, I think they're a lot better shape. So we're about 25% harvested in Manitoba. We still got a little ways to go here yet. This week forecast sounds pretty good for the most part. Just need some little bit of sun, a little bit of wind. But overall, I think we're probably going to be slightly below average. Our average yields in Manitoba across all bean types is about just over 1,700 pounds. So I'm expecting those yields to be lower this year than what we have been. But you know what? The beans are being grown in the best areas right now. We've seen that over the years. We've seen that transition away from some of the marginal ground into the more prime bean ground, and that's what kept our yields up for all those years.
All right. Thanks for your time. We'll wait for that sun to come out and dry things out for harvest to resume. Thanks, Dennis.
Thanks a lot.